So hello everybody, obviously you know who I am, you might know who this is. This is Dino, say hello Dino.
Hello Dino.
So anyway, Dino and I are meeting in a place called the Crystal Palace, which is a pub in Glasgow. We've been meeting up, thank you very much. Cheers. And also cheers as well. It's alright, I'll work through these. So anyway, we meet up once a month now to have a wee chat about music, our lives and our witnessing experiences. So I'm going to be asking Dino here because he's got many stories in relation to cart busting, and but I was hoping to capture first Dino's backstory, because we're hoping to do more of these in relation to some of his experiences when he's been cart busting, which are completely different to mine because it comes at a completely different angle. So I'm going to ask Dino a few questions here, so we'll just put here to Dino. So Dino, first and foremost, how old are you?
Well, 63 now. In fact, just turned 63 this week.
Really?
Yeah, Monday. 63,
Really?
Yeah.
Happy belated birthday to Dino on his 63rd birthday. So that means you're a month older than me. Yeah. So he's a month older than me. Bizarrely, I look 10 years younger, but I don't know what it is. It's the good genes. It's the good genes. So anyway, so let's just say, obviously, how long were you a Jehovah's Witness for?
Actually, I think it was only 16 years, actually, when I think about it. I first was contacted when I was 19. I was a trainee hairdresser at the time. And my father, I used to go visit my father, and he had a pile of books and magazines slowly building up. And eventually he spoke to me about it. And I went away and read the Truth book.
The Truth that leads to everlasting life. Right, okay, yeah.
So that was what introduced me to it, and started going to the meetings with them.
What year was that?
Well, that would have been
1981, I think.
80 or 81.
91.
Yeah, around about then. So I was about 19, and I just sort of took to it straight away. It seemed to make a lot of sense. So went to the meetings, and within a year or two I was ministerial servant. It was quite quick.
Really?
Yeah, I made quite quick progress within a couple of years.
When did you start pioneering?
Yeah, it would have been...
Was that before you were servant?
Yeah, maybe just...
Yeah.
No, I was very quick onto the pioneering. I got baptised in 1982 at Edinburgh, Murrayfield.
Really?
Yeah, 82. And started pioneering shortly after that. Regular pioneer. And then we basically met up in about 83, 84.
Yeah, I moved to Scotland in 84, but I do remember meeting you in Murrayfield at one time, or it might have been Ayr. So I used to come up to Murrayfield conventions every year from 1980. So at some point, our errand other bandmate, Ian Gill, hello Ian if you're listening, you should be here but you're not, he was friends with Dino and I was friends with him, and all of us were musicians. We were all musicians. So
I was a drummer, not a musician.
So anyway, as I was doing music down in Ellesmere Port, the offer was put out that I come up to Ayr and become a member of a band, produce music with Ian and Dino and other people who may be interested. And me and Dino started writing to each other in about probably 1982, I think it was. And we used to be swapping tapes about that time, till eventually I moved up to Ayr itself in 1984, March of 1984, and then me and him started living together in a
Not as a couple.
not as a couple, separate beds, in a guest house controlled by a landlady who didn't like me but loved Dino, called Mrs. Mac. But that's a completely different story. So me and Dino lived together from March of 1984 till July the 21st. I know why, because I moved it out on the day of my birthday. So there you go. That's what I did. So there you go. And I moved into a flat in the town, and that's when me and Dino split up.
Not for the last time.
So anyway, so by this stage, in 1984, you're a servant, yes? Are you a servant at this point?
Ministerial servant.
And you're a full-time pioneer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Went to the pioneer school in Glasgow.
Oh, did you? I think I went to that as well. I'm sure I went to one of them. I went to one of them. I can't remember if it's a servant or a pioneer school, but I went to one of them in Glasgow.
And I went to the inaugural ministerial servant school that was held. In fact, Teddy moved to Glasgow, and I was meant to follow up and move to Glasgow to Tory Glen, Rutherglen. But there was a delay because I had to go to the ministerial servant school, and if I had moved congregations, I wouldn't have been a ministerial servant.
Oh, is that the reason?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Oh,
So I wanted to go to the ministerial servant school, so I had to wait till I'd done that before moving, because in those days, if you were an elder or a servant in one congregation, you weren't automatically an elder or a servant.
When you went to another congregation, yeah,
the Holy
that's
Spirit
right.
didn't work like that.
Yeah, you know, see that Holy Spirit, it's not the great communicator that they make out. So, okay, so eventually you moved to Glasgow.
Yeah, so moved to Glasgow to Tory Glen, so we were in the Rutherglen congregation. And so basically, we had a lot of, we were very zealous actually in the field ministry.
Yeah.
And at that time, you really had to, go round the doors and
Talk to people.
talking to people.
So
Yeah,
that you remember the talking to people bit, and also the counting the hours bit as well. Remember when you counted your hours, that bit, yeah.
So, we've spent a lot of time together, writing music, playing in our band. At the same time, in fact, the reason why we got into our music was because the society were very hard on worldly music.
Yeah.
So we basically thought, right, we'll write our own songs, not gospel music, but tinged by the beliefs.
Yeah.
So we thought, we'll write our own music, so we're not listening to worldly music.
Yeah.
But then that wasn't good enough. Because,
No, it wasn't.
Because you just didn't play music, write your own music.
Unless the governing body had sponsored each separate song. Yeah,
There was one time we were in Air Kingdom Hall. I think they must have been in doing hall cleaning or something. And there was a piano, because at that time it was a sister that used to play Kingdom Melodies on the piano.
That's right.
So anyway, we were in the hall doing cleaning, just about to leave, and Terry just puts the lid up on the piano and starts playing.
That's right. One of my songs, one of my own songs, which I composed on the piano.
And one elderly sister gave him short shrift for.
She did. Yeah, she said to me, "Tell me, what are you?" She says, "What are you playing?" I says, "I'm writing a song." I says, "I'm going to be writing it about the new system." She says, "Oh, you can't be doing that." So I'm going, "What?" And she was berating me for composing a song in the Kingdom Hall, which actually is a finished song, which is called, I think it's called "Take It From Me." That was the song I wrote there. And she berated me, saying that we cannot compose music unless the organisation and the governing body have sanctioned it. So you couldn't win, really. Anyway, back to you.
Yeah, so I ended up in the same congregation again in Rutherglen. I was a ministerial servant in Rutherglen as well. But although very zealous for for the truth, as we called it. I always had the opinion that you believed it was the truth, but whenever I went round the doors speaking to people, I always took the view, I think I have the truth, but you convince me otherwise, or I'll convince you that I've got the truth. So I never took the view that you couldn't not speak to people or listen to their arguments, because I always knew that if I was wrong, that they could prove me wrong, and that would be to my benefit. The same token, if I prove to you that you've got something wrong in your ideology, then that's to your benefit. So I always took that view, and I always knew that whilst I believed it, that the idea about the 1914 generation, it was time limited.
Yes.
I always thought,
yes.
I believe it makes sense to me, but it cannot go beyond the year 2000, for instance. It's a belief that is going to run out of time. The longer it goes, it's more likely to be wrong.
Yeah.
So when it came to 1995, there was a watchtower came out when the first changed generation came along. In fact, just prior to that.
Had you moved out of Rutherglen by that time?
No, I was still in Rutherglen just
Okay.
then. But there was about a year or two where you kind of you couldn't quite put your finger on it. But reading the watchtowers, you just got an inkling that there was something not right, there was something changing. And then in '95, when that article came out, the Watchtower study, about the change of the generation, for me, I knew the game was up. It was wrong, and the change was being made.
Funny enough, that's exactly the same thing happened with me, but unfortunately, as we're all well aware, you couldn't discuss this with your fellow brothers to say, actually, and some of them were in complete denial, saying, there hasn't been a change. I'm going, hold it a second, this has been a fundamental doctrine change here, and why doesn't this? I can't understand personally why people weren't as upset as I was, but I think deep down people already were upset. But of course, what was the choice?
Yeah. Basically, when I read that article, although the paragraph didn't say it explicitly, reading between the lines, it was basically saying we're making this change, and if you don't go along with the change, then you're basically a rebel, and you're not humble, and basically you're apostate. So it didn't say it, but reading between the lines, that's what it was implying. You had to go along with it. So that was when the alarm bells were ringing for me. And then I moved then to, me and Kathy moved to Kilmarnock congregation.
And how long were you in there for?
Well, we were there a year, and that's all it took for us to go, no.
No, that is extraordinary. The reason why this is because Dino and Kathy moved to Kilmarnock out of Rutherglen, and me and my wife moved from Rutherglen to East Kilbride, and it took me a year, the same as you, to realise no. And literally, I was glad that I was given the ability to move out of Rutherglen, who had some really domineering superfine apostles in that congregation. And then when you got associated with a congregation where you weren't that, you know what I mean, ingrained in with everybody, I found it easier at that point to say, you know what, I don't miss anybody here, I don't associate with anybody here, so it's going to be easier for me to say adios.
Well, I mean, I had actually more or less made up my mind that it wasn't the truth, and I was finding out other things like, the Guardian newspaper, for instance, did the story on the NGO with the United Nations, and so when I saw that, plus then there was the Daily Record had an article saying that in America there was a big change to the understanding
of 1914 and the generation. They actually brought it out saying that they've moved the goalposts, and because it hit the national news in that paper. Yeah.
So we were finding this out from the national newspapers before we were getting told anything in the hall, you know. So I was still going to the meetings in Kilmarnock on the basis my wife was still willing to attend, but basically mentally I wasn't there anymore.
Same as me. So it's, I think they call it PMO now, which means
physically and
mentally out, and that's exactly the way I was. I was literally, in fact, they actually started to do the group. Remember the groups, everybody? Well, not the Beatles. But remember the groups they used to do? Well, the group got shunted to my house to encourage me to keep on going to the meetings because I couldn't dodge a meeting when it was in my house.
Couldn't relate.
You know, so at that point, I know when that came out in Rutherglen, I knew then that was it. I knew it was it.
It just reminds me of one of the last Tuesday group meetings I went to. We're getting near the end of the study, and there's a scripture in Revelation where it talks about the dead being eaten by the carrion birds. And there was a sister, an older sister, and she was so enthusiastic about, I can't wait for to see the birds eating the flesh of the evil. And I'm thinking to myself, am I in the same religion as this person? You know, why would you want to...
Was she Rutherglen?
No, that was Kilmarnock.
That was Kilmarnock, right.
But I suddenly thought, I don't know, are we in different religions, you know, because that's not what it's about. You know, you're trying to save people. You're not looking forward to seeing people dying. But yeah, so shortly after that, and then actually at one point, I think you said you gave me some information.
Yes, I did.
And I'd read that, and that made things clearer.
Yeah.
I just, it's funny that I knew there was more to it. I couldn't quite put my finger on it entirely. But subsequently, in later years, the more I learned and looked into things, it just, especially with the United Nations thing, basically the organisation had secretly apostatized themselves, affiliated themselves with the scarlet-coloured wild beast. So a bunch of hypocrites, and they lied about it, tried to make out they hadn't done it. So for me, that was the final straw. And, so I stopped going to meetings, and basically after a couple of years, I think I threw out all my books. I was quite an arduous student. I studied diligently, did my own research. I used to go to the Mitchell Library in Glasgow, and I used to research articles on the Trinity, how to disprove the Trinity, things like that.
And you also went down, you also did a lot of research on Greek words as well. Remember?
Yeah. I did a lot of that. So I didn't just always take what it said in the magazines and the books. I would take it a bit further, do my own research, because I was trying to know best arguments to counter arguments you might find in the books. You know, just to understand things better. But after a while, whilst we were in Kilmarnock and we stopped going to meetings, we got a visit from a couple of elders turned up at our door one time. So I said, fair enough, they've come to see us, come in and have a chat. But then I realised what it was. The circuit overseer was visiting the next week, so it clicked and I thought, you're here because when the circuit overseer comes, he's going to say, right, have you shepherded the ones you know? So you've turned up so that you can say, oh yes, we've done that. So I expressed to them some of my questions I had, some of the things I wanted to talk about, and I said, well look, why don't you come back? And these are the things I want to speak about. I want you to talk to me about these and disprove what I'm thinking, you know. All right, we'll come back, you know.
Never saw them again. Unbelievable.
Then one time, one of those elders, they were working our street, And I looked out the window and I saw one of the elders on the other side of the street, and I thought, they're not going to come near us.
Yes.
So I went out my front door and I went into the street and I called him over. He didn't want to come over.
Oh my God.
I called him over and I says, why didn't you come back?
Yeah.
I was waiting to you.
Yeah.
So they're clearly not interested, and they clearly don't want to even hear any argument against any doctrine. But I was saying to them, because what they like to say is that, as Brother Condescending said a couple of weeks ago, they question your humility.
Yes.
But I was showing humility by saying, I'll listen, come to my home and speak to me and prove me wrong.
You prove me wrong.
Yeah.
That is because you're not being dogmatic.
No.
You're not saying it's my way or no way. You're saying, I want you, I'm humble enough to say, you prove me wrong, which is different to the Jehovah's Witnesses, who are not humble enough to say, you may have a point there. They are utterly one way or no way, and that's it. And you should have the ability to, as I said to that guy the other week, to reason from the scripture. Say, let's reason about this. Let's be reasonable people and talk about this. But unfortunately, their reasoning is purely based on the understanding that they're given by a bunch of blokes in America who've never met.
So for me, after a couple of years, I basically actually threw most of my study books. I had a lot of Jewish books that I'd got, Jewish interlinears.
Really?
Check the Hebrew words in certain passages. And I bought a lot of different translations and various study aids and things. But eventually, I just got rid of them, and I never thought about religion and Christianity for a good number of years, until my father, who remained a witness.
Is he still a witness?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. But he's now in a care home suffering from dementia.
Right.
But he basically, because I wasn't going to meetings, he basically wasn't really speaking to me or having really much to do with me. So we were estranged.
Right.
But he then got dementia. His wife became ill with MND. So both of them get taken into care.
Motor neuron disease.
So they both get taken into care. But in fact, just before that, before my dad got ill, I did used to visit him from time to time and take him out for a lunch and try to speak to him. And one time we're sitting in a coffee shop called Cafe Nero, and we're having a coffee, and he was trying to say, why don't you come back to the meetings? Don't you believe? And I says, look, there's nothing I would like more than to believe it.
Yes,
to believe it's true.
Exactly,
nothing would please me more. I says, but if I can't believe it intellectually, there's no point. And he turned to me and he said, and he got really, really angry, and he says, if you don't come back to the meetings, you're not my son, and I don't want anything ever to do with you again. So I said to him, look, I'm going to go get another coffee. I'll get you another coffee. You have a think about what you've just said. So I went away. Come back a couple of minutes later.
And he's gone.
Never saw him again.
Never saw him again. Oh God.
No, well, he apologised. He immediately realised he had been very unreasonable. And that wasn't the way to inspire you to bring you back.
No, you're right. No.
But so we would occasionally have discussions. But anyway, my dad got dementia now. Can't really discuss these things with him. But I now take to do with him. I'm power of attorney for him and looked after him. And here's a story. As soon as he goes into the care home, some brothers and sisters were visiting them as a couple in the care home. But sadly, his wife eventually died. And as soon as she died, the brothers and sisters used to come and they would watch the meetings on the laptop.
Oh, yeah.
As soon as the wife died, they never came back. and they've left my dad in there. Now, they're meant to be his family now, the spiritual family. And apart from one brother who's been assigned to visit him, he's not a ministerial servant, he's not an elder, but basically the congregation, none of them visit him bar this one brother, right? And I've spoken to the elders there, I've phoned them up and I've met some of them in the street and I've said to them, you should be shepherding my dad. Just because he's in a care home, you should still shepherd him. And wouldn't it be nice for some of the brothers and sisters to take it in turn to visit? They've just left them. They've just assigned this one brother, as I said, who's not a shepherd, and he just calls when he can, which is good of him. But basically the congregation have, his spiritual family have just washed hands off him.
Unbelievable. That's the real Christians for you. The worldwide brotherhoods of Jehovah's Witnesses not looking after their elderly congregation members because they're too busy standing in street corners, ignoring everybody. So
yeah, well, this is it. I've spoken to ones in there on the street, and they ask me, "How's your father getting on?" And I'm saying,
"Well, you should know.
You should know. You should visit him or get reports. You know, what are the elders who shepherd him telling you?" And I don't know whether they think by asking me that I'm not looking after him myself. Right. And I'm saying, no, I'm the one he wouldn't really speak to.
Yes.
But I'm the one that's now looking after him, visiting him, take care of his business while you all ignore him. But as a result of looking after my dad, I had to speak to a number of elders and such like. So I ended up, I spoke to one or two witnesses that I knew, and again, of course, they were trying to encourage me to come back and referred me to jw.org. In fact, one sister who had went to the same pioneer school as me, she sent me the link to jw.org for David Splain's overlapping generation video.
Yes, well, that'd be nice.
So I was humble enough to look at it, to listen to it, but realised listening to it,
he was talking up his arse.
Absolute bollocks. No scriptural evidence towards it at all.
No, going beyond the things that were written clearly, you know what I mean?
Really.
Apostatizing our own beliefs and the beliefs that he previously had.
Now, it's a very clever thinking that they've put into that to come up with this. But the point is, clever as it is, it's just totally unreasonable, illogical, and not scriptural, which is the main thing.
Exactly. And basically doesn't make any sense.
Makes no sense.
Makes no sense at all.
But I started having a few conversations with one or two that I knew, and I spoke to one brother who we had spent a lot of time with over the years. I'll not mention names, who
Is he an elder?
No, actually he never was.
Oh, right, okay.
He never was, because just not the qualities to ever be appointed an elder.
Oh, what a shame.
But I started speaking to him because I did some more research and I found some very interesting things about the prologue to the Gospel of John, one of my favourite subjects. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and how I'd always understood that, the witness's point of view. But I did more research, and I now read a lot of different theologians, famous theologians like Dodd and Baird, Mackay, Dunn, Lamp, all these famous English professors in the theological writings, and came across wonderful new understandings on the prologue, for instance, logos, and how that all should be translated, and a better understanding of it. So I spoke to Danny, and in fairness to him, he did listen to what I had to say, and I realised it was quite alternative to what he would know. But you listen to it, and I says, well, look, you go away, have a think about it, check out what I've said to you, explained to you, and then come back and we'll have another chat and you can tell me what you think. And I sent him some more information from where I'd got the ideas from. So he says, right, I'll get back to you and tell you what I think about what you've said. So I waited for about a week, heard nothing back. 2 weeks, still heard nothing. So I texted him and I said, Danny. Sorry.
Danny.
I thought you were going to come back to me.
Danny M.
And he said, I did reply, he sent it to the wrong email address.
Right.
So I gave him the right email address. So he sends me this email and he's given me this screed of citations from various Watchtower publications and such like, disagreeing with everything I'd said.
Is he still a witness?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. But it's as if I've never seen these scriptures or these entries before.
Yeah, it's before,
I know it all,
Yeah.
He made one valid point that I would have liked to have discussed with him, but in his email, he starts off by saying, having listened to what you'd said and the other references you've sent me, he says, I can see that you're never going to come back to the truth, and there's nothing I can say to convince you otherwise.
Right.
He says, so I'm not going to further the conversation unless you come back to the meetings.
Yeah.
So if you know where to find me.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, how arrogant
Yeah.
and how judgmental.
Yeah.
Because basically I was saying to him, you've listened to what I've got to
He
say.
didn't use the word apostate, did he, in that? But I think he was inferring that, isn't he?
Yeah, fair in that.
Yeah.
But he was judging, saying that, you're obviously not going to come back. How do you know that? You haven't argued the case with me. You might have been able to reason with me and prove to me that I was wrong.
Yes.
So it was a case of just walking away and ducking out of the argument.
Yeah.
So, thanks to Danny, I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to start preaching to the converted. Right?
It's just because of that, was it?
Yeah. I thought, if you're going to be so arrogant and judgmental.
Well, when was this, by the way?
This was maybe 2 years ago.
2 years ago, okay. Right.
2 years ago, maybe.
Right.
And it was actually a catalyst to start looking into things in more depth. And I actually found that, basically I started reading even more, researching a lot of things, and I found myself raising more and more questions. So I found that the best way to discuss these things was to approach the brothers and sisters on the carts. I used to work in Edinburgh, so I used to sit in the train up to Edinburgh, and I'm reading theological books, I'm reading Watchtower references, and I'm coming up with questions. And when I get to Edinburgh, I'd get maybe 10-15 minutes before I had to get into my work. So the witnesses would be on the carts outside the train station, so I'd spend 10-15 minutes speaking to them there and raising questions with them.
So you've been cart busting for just 2 years, yeah?
2 years.
Was I doing it before you?
Possibly.
Okay.
Possibly.
Well, that's interesting, because when I started putting up my videos of talking to the carters, Dino would say to me sometimes, I watch some of your videos and it's not the same religion anymore. Because I used to be coming at a completely different angle that he was. But it's interesting hearing that. So the thing that I find is, it's great when you have a long background of being a Jehovah's Witness, because you're able to tell, especially the newer Jehovah's Witnesses, things that they didn't even know that the organization used to promote and we believed. So then you have to say, hold on a second, if we were told that was the truth, and now we're told that's not the truth, I always say to them, what's the opposite of truth? And they go, lies. I'm going, what truth was lies? And that's a punk for one of my songs, by the way. That's what we think.
Always away.
Always away, yeah. But that is true.
Available on Spotify.
And YouTube, and also Amazon Play. So I don't want you to tell us any of our stories, but the most important thing about any of your stories is that you've told us how you came to end, how you became a witness, how you ended being a witness, and then what then put the fire in your belly to then say, now I've got the confidence and I want to confront these guys in public who are there speaking to no one, and I'm going to go up to them and preach to them.
Yeah, but the same token, as I said before, when I used to be on the ministry, I would always take the view, if the householder can prove me wrong, I'll accept that.
Yes.
So, by the same token, I'm coming up with questions. So I'm thinking, well, if I speak to the Carters,
yes,
and if I've misunderstood something or got something wrong,
yes,
then
put me right.
Put me right, because I would love to still believe it.
Exactly, because I'm exactly the same point. I've always said this before, and this is a major failing of understanding from Jehovah's Witnesses. The hardest thing in your life, if you've been a witness for so long, is to leave the witnesses. Because of course we know that we are abandoning our hope to live forever in paradise on earth. Who wants to give that up as a reality? So if we've got this wrong, if we've, both of us, or everybody else who've left the witnesses, have fundamentally got this wrong, we go to these people and say, please tell us that we've got this wrong. Because if we got this wrong, it is a life and death conversation. It really is. But unfortunately, they don't take that view. We go to them because we're saying, look, we want you to prove us wrong because we've made a decision. But always you may be second guessing whether you've done the right thing. Maybe you're thinking, well, maybe I've got this wrong. But unfortunately, after every conversation I had with the Carters, I'm more convinced than ever that they don't have the truth. And the best thing that we did ever, they should have done it earlier, is leave the organisation.
Yeah, it's proven to yourself that you have made the right decision to leave. Because if you're giving them the opportunity to prove you wrong and they can't do it, then you've made the right decision not to be part of that organisation any longer. But one of the things that really shocked me was the lack of knowledge that a lot of them have. They can't argue from the scriptures at all. And I don't know whether, particularly in Edinburgh, I would approach Carters and I would ask them questions like, for instance, where in the Bible does it say that Jesus is the Archangel Michael? Right? Where does it say that? And I remember these two sisters in Princes Street, and they're saying, I need to go look that up, I need to check that out, research it. And I'm thinking, but that's one of your major doctrines.
That's one of your big doctrines,
That's your identity of who Jesus is. That should be the tip of your tongue. You shouldn't have to go away and research something like that. You should have the scripture
to hand.
Or you look up a book or something and it's easy. It was just basically avoiding it because they know that there is no scripture that says that, that proves that.
There's a lot of things that we could talk about at this point, like how come the 144,000 in a book that's full of symbolic gestures is taken as a set figure, but everything else in Revelation we're to assume is symbolic.
Well, just bizarre. Just on that point, I was thinking about this, 144,000, if it was a literal number, it doesn't make sense because I'm now doing a theology degree at the University of Aberdeen, and one of the things we studied last session was about, there's a unit on missionary work, and also about numbers of Christians during the first few centuries. AD. And one of the facts is that there was a rapid expansion from the 2nd to 3rd century, so much so that by about the year 300 AD, it's estimated that there was between, I think I can say accurately, 3 to 6 million Christians, right, in the first 3 centuries. And in those centuries, the Christians were still getting fed to the lions, and we were studying some of the patristic writings that included accounts of Christians being sent to the gladiatorial amphitheatres and either put to the sword or torn to shreds by wild animals. So basically, these Christians were dying for their faith. So how could the number 6 million Christians in the first few centuries dying faithfully, how could we get to the 20th century and there's still been 144,000 still to be filled up?
Yes, and apparently that figure was settled in the 1930s. It was reaffirmed in the 60s that number had been reached, and yet bizarrely, since me and Dino left the organisation, there are more of them, and some of them are younger than us. If anybody, me and Dino's age, back in 1984, 85, 86, had come out and said, oh, by the way, lads, I've decided to take the emblems today because I'm really anointed, you'd put and say apostate, mentally ill, expelling from the congregation. But now, of course, welcome aboard, lads, because we need you sorts of boys in the governing body, because all the other governing body are about to drop off this mortal any time now. It's just unbelievable.
Because when we started going to the meetings, the thought that we could have been of an age ever to become the anointed.
No, it's impossible, isn't it?
Impossible. And yet now you've got brothers Winder, and there's the brother that used to be in the banana splits, Brother Fleagle. He was in the banana splits.
Was he?
There was
it Troll-la-la?
It was Trooper Fleagle, Snork, and there was one other. The Brother Fleagle and Brother Winder are younger than us.
And there's another one who's been there a few years, he's younger than us as well. There's another one, the one with the baldy head, he's got a beard now. He's younger than us as well. And if anybody back in like the late 80s, early 90s, younger than us, who'd said, I'm the anointed, you would just literally you would have laughed at them. And now, the number of those partaking the emblems is up. There's more of them taking the emblems up now than when I left in January the 1st, 2000. There's more of them now. How does that figure out? The figure was settled in 35, ratified in the 60s, but now there's more of them. As I said many times, it just doesn't make any sense.
Well, I mean, even what I was saying about the early centuries of Christianity reaching millions of Christians who would have been of the anointed.
You're willing to get torn apart.
Yeah. So dying faithfully.
How many of our current carters would be willing to go, transported to the arena to get their heads bitten off the lion? Not many.
And even within the witness movement, by about 1970, I checked the figures off the top of my head, it was something like, they'd reached something like 3 million witnesses, 3 million publishers by about 1970.
Yeah.
So how could there be numbers of the 144,000 still to be filled?
Yes.
When the numbers are in millions by the 70s?
No, it's honestly, it doesn't make any sense to me now.
It doesn't add up.
Sorry, the problem is logic destroys this organisation every single time. Right, anyway, I think we're going to cut on. We've been on for 43 minutes. I said 30 minutes, but that's 43 minutes. Hopefully, once I get home and I'll upload this to computer, it'll probably take about 2 hours. Hopefully you'll be able to hear us over the sound of our fellow inhabitants in this pub. And hopefully from now on that me and Dino can do sort of some of our calls where Dino can tell us his experiences of karting, which let's just say some of the experiences he's had are completely different to mine, and they're well worth recording.
I would just say lastly, some of the conversations I've had with Carters have been really nice.
Yes.
And I've had really nice chats, some nice, reasonable brothers. There's one in particular in Edinburgh I met. His name just escapes me at the moment, but I think he was of Greek extraction. And so when we speak to the Carters, it's not to go have a fight or to have a big argument. And so as long as the people you're speaking to are reasonable, then you can have a really pleasant and fruitful discussion.
Yes,
you don't have to agree, you can have a nice discussion.
Yes, exactly.
But more than often, you're going to, brothers have...
It's going to descend in being confrontational as it did last time.
Because they're just, I think, embarrassed that they can't answer questions.
Exactly.
So they lose their temper and such like. But that's not the goal. The goal is to reason from the scriptures and find out what is the actual truth of the Bible, if there is any.
Okay, I'm going to cut it there, and hopefully this all works. If not, we'll have to do this all again via Zoom. See you later. Bye-bye. Thank you.